All right, welcome everybody. I am very excited for tonight's topic. And so first of all, I want to introduce myself for those of you that are brand new. My name is Sarah Hine, and I'm just going to host tonight's Mental Wellness Monday Night series. I love sharing topics of great interest and need. And this is one that is very, very near and dear to my heart because I truly believe that every family in America is touched by this topic in some way, shape, or form. And so I am very excited to share with all of you this great topic tonight on mental wellness and really talking about the National Autism Awareness Month that we're in and the National Stress Awareness Month that we're in, and really focusing on this gut-brain story for our kids. The statistics that are out there are just so alarming of what our children are going through, and so many are struggling. So I'm excited to turn this over to Dr. Shawn Talbott. Dr. Shawn has his PhD in nutritional biochemistry, and he is so accomplished and yet has such a humble heart. 13 books he's authored. He's been all over the country. Lots of TV shows, talk shows, news, health segments. But I love his humble heart of service to serve others and educate. So without further ado, I am going to hand the slides over to you, Shawn, so that you can share this wonderful information with everybody. So there you go.
All right, great. So on my screen share, Sarah, thanks for inviting me to this, to do this tonight with you. But on my screen, the slides are only showing a portion of the window. I don't know if that's just mine or if it's also showing that on yours or anybody else.
I have it on the full screen. So if you want to click on, do you see where it shows the little windows? You can move it. You can change it.
Yes. Somebody else is saying that too. Here, let me do this if I can. Let me see if I can share mine and see if people can see this.
Okay, go for it.
Do people see now if I go like that, people might see my slides now, or maybe they see, do you see one big slide that says the new slides?
I do. Yep, better.
Okay.
They're all seeing better.
Good.
Yay, let's go,
good.
John.
So I'll just run it from here and then I'll hand it back over to you, okay?
Perfect.
Sometimes these Zoom things, you never know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is National Autism Awareness Month. It's also National Stress Awareness Month, and it's interesting that those two things coincide, isn't it? For people to we're going to talk about ADD, we're going to talk about autism, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things tonight. But what they all share is that we used to think of these problems as exclusively brain issues. And the new science around mental wellness really tells us that most of these things, whether we're talking about depression or stress or focus issues like ADHD, or true gut-brain axis dysfunctions like autism, they're not just brain problems, they're gut-brain problems. And bigger than that, they're gut-brain axis problems. And there's some really, really good research around this area right now. So it's the timing couldn't be any better. So, back, gosh, as little as 10 years ago, we used to think that all these things were brain problems because that we sense these imbalances in the brain, and we have behavior problems or focus problems or stress problems or mood problems, whatever the case may be. So it was logical that the dysfunction must be in there. But now the new science around this really gets us to understand that this is bigger. It's not that the brain's no longer important. It's just that now we have other targets to really make a meaningful impact on helping people feel better. So this idea of a second brain, this idea of the microbiome, the bacteria in our guts, actually sending out the majority of the signals that the brain in our head is going to receive and collate and act on. So just to give you an example, 90% of the serotonin is made in our guts that's found in our bodies. It's not made in our brains, it's made in our guts. And that serotonin has signaling effects in our brain. Serotonin is sort of the neurotransmitter of being happy. 70% of our dopamine is made in our gut. That's the neurotransmitter of motivation. And I'll get more into neurotransmitters later, but the general idea is that if this microbiome, these bacteria are making those signals that are having the signaling effect in the brain, it makes sense to go there first. It makes sense to really treat the second brain as the first brain. And when we do that, we can get proper signaling from the cells in our gut, which are 100 trillion strong. That's how many bacteria we have in our guts. That is 10 times more than what we have in the rest of our human body. So on a cellular basis, we're only 10% human. 90% of what's happening in this human organism is bacterial. And we have to get them in the right balance so that they send the right signals so that our brain functions the way that we want it to feel, or functions the way that we want it to function. So when we look at this, how that all happens, it can get a little bit complicated, right? But it doesn't really need to. It really comes down to this. If you're in balance, you're going to feel good. And if you're out of balance, you might feel bad in a variety of ways. And so what I mean by that is that if you're out of balance here in your gut, you're going to be sending the wrong signals across your immune system, across your neurological system, across your neurotransmitter system, and you're going to get static coming up into the brain. That's a fair analogy, that if we're getting the wrong signals, we're getting the wrong pictures, so to speak, right? If we're thinking of this as kind of like a TV station.
It's kind of like you have static cling in your brain, right?
That's exactly what it is. And so,
wow.
when we talk about clarifying these signals, you can think of it as like, you're working with your cell phone, right? You're getting static on the line. Is it coming from that end? Is it coming from this end? Is it because of the tower? Is it because of the atmosphere? You have an electrical storm or something like that.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that can mess up the signaling between those two brains. And so what we're trying to do is come at this from a biochemical perspective and make sure that the signals leaving the gut are appropriate, that the signals traveling across this part in the middle, this axis, where some of those signals go through your nerves, some go through your neurotransmitters, some go through your immune system, and they reach your brain in a clear, concise way. And if we do that, people feel better. And there's all kinds of ways we can measure that. So, autism is one of these sort of, like I said before, classic gut-brain axis dysfunctions. ADD is too, whether you call it ADD or ADHD. And there's lots and lots of people, not just kids, lots and lots of kids and teens and adults who are in these situations. ADD situations, ASD, autism spectrum disorder situations, PANDA situations. These are, sort of the definitions of each of these. And the incidence that we're seeing, there's a huge spike in the number of people who are being affected by each one of these conditions. And part of the reason is that our microbiomes are under attack. They're under attack from processed foods and stress and poor sleep patterns, and the list can go on and on and on. And when that happens, when our microbiome is out of whack and our second brain is not sending the right signals, we can try to pin it down to one or another neurotransmitter. Like I just said a few minutes ago, serotonin is sort of the happiness neurotransmitter. Dopamine is sort of the motivation neurotransmitter. Norepinephrine is sort of the focus neurotransmitter. But that's an oversimplification, because typically what they're doing is they're working in concert with each other. And that's why when we talk about, here's another way of looking at it too. This can get really sort of overlapping. So that, the moral of the story, so to speak, is that you don't want to focus on just one neurotransmitter. You want to focus on all of them simultaneously. And the way to do that is to get a really robust, really diverse microbiome. Because if the microbiome is the source of all of those neurotransmitters, if you have an unbalanced one, you might be off on one or more neurotransmitters. But if you're balanced, you're going to be sending good signals in all of those different ways. And that's one of the reasons that when we approach it this way, we get such good, comprehensive, holistic benefits in people. When you approach it sort of the standard way, which is these kinds of things that people have access to, these don't really get the job done because they're not comprehensive. Ritalin or Concerta or any of these kinds of things are they're unifocused. They work on one neurotransmitter. They work on one pathway in the brain. They don't work on the whole family that we need to. The other reason that these aren't probably the first thing that you want to look for, because of this. All of these ADD drugs, in addition to all the antidepressants, all the anti-anxieties, all the sleep drugs, they all carry FDA's most stringent warning for side effects, which is called a black box warning, right? You would never want that as your first line therapy. And that's one of the reasons that I love about natural ingredients, is that we can get that rebalancing effect in people using herbs and using vitamins and using minerals and using probiotic supplements and using prebiotic fibers. We can get you rebalanced so that maybe you don't need these kinds of things and the side effects that come along with them. So, Sarah, do you have any questions so far before I sort of
do, because that last slide, I just feel like every parent out there, myself included, is when we go to these doctors, and doctors are great. I have great friends that are doctors, so it's not bashing them, but the first thing that they turn to is they push the medication. And it's frustrating because, there are so many side effects. And so I really appreciate you sharing this, because it's great information to give parents hope that you can try something potentially holistically first, and then
right.
medication as a potential second alternative. Correct?
Right. So yeah. So my own son, when he was in 5th grade, the teachers wanted us to medicate him, right? And so he, didn't want to focus, didn't want to sit still, kind of had ants in his pants, like a lot of 5th graders do. And we thought, well, hey, if what we're going to try, natural options, don't work, we always have that to go back to, right? And you made a good point about, doctors aren't necessarily trying to push these drugs on us, but that's what they have access to. That's what the option has been for so many years, until just very, very recently, So it's not like they were ignoring these natural options. They just weren't sort of mainstream enough. And, Amari is trying to do a service by bringing these out to market. So anyway, I'll tell you guys what we did with my son in just a little bit. So that's a little tease about what we actually gave him. But so when we talk about those signals, right? Many of those signals are coming from the gut. They're coming from the gut microbiome. Some of those signals are these things called short chain fatty acids that these bacteria will make. Your gut microbiome makes these neurotransmitters, makes these metabolites that signal the immune system, and then all of these are going to go out into the systemic circulation and have a variety of signaling effects across that gut-brain axis. So even if we can get all of this rebalanced, we also have to ask ourselves these kinds of things, right? This will be a very familiar list of food ingredients that people who have kids who have ADHD or to autism or any of these things that we're talking about, because they can cause damage down here in the microbiome. Some of these ingredients, depending on the person, can cause inflammation in the gut, can grow the wrong kinds of bacteria, can be fuel to make the wrong kinds of metabolites. It's almost like you're inducing a sunburn, or you're causing a wound in this tissue down here, and then that damage is being signaled out into the rest of the body and actually causing a damage into the brain. And so the question becomes, how do we fix that, right? Sometimes you need to get some of these things out of the system. And sometimes you need to put the right things into the system. So here's an example of, just again, showing you how nutrition can have a meaningful impact on how we feel. Here's tryptophan, which is an amino acid found in, our protein foods. This is a precursor for serotonin. Here's phenylalanine and tyrosine. These are precursors for dopamine and noradrenaline, or norepinephrine. So here, if you're getting the wrong signals, you're getting static. If you're getting the right building blocks for the right signals, you're getting happiness, you're getting focus, you're getting motivation. If you have leaky gut, where things that are supposed to stay in the gut can leak across into the immune system, into the systemic circulation, then you're going to get an immune system reaction. Then you're going to get an inflammatory reaction, and that's going to introduce static in the system. So, kids with ADD, and I say sort of my shorthand is to say kids with ADD and kids with autism, but like I said earlier, it goes for teens and it goes for adults. Almost 100% of the time also have some gut disturbances. They might have a microbiome disruption. They might have a leaky gut. They might have inflammation in the gut. They might have inflammation systemically in their circulation, things like cytokines that we can measure. And so the question becomes, do you approach them by balancing neurotransmitters, or do you try to calm their inflammation? Or do you try to calm their immune system, which in a lot of cases is the source of their inflammation? Or do you try to improve their gut, their leaky gutness, then make good, good gut integrity? Or do you calm the inflammation? Or do you rebuild the microbiome? It's not an or, it's an and. All of those things are an and. You want to address all of those at the same time. And the reason you want to do that is because if you can get a healthy gut and a healthy axis, you're going to have a healthy brain. If you're dysfunctional across any of those steps that I just rattled off, you're going to have a problem. And you really have to treat this as a whole system instead of just something that can be treated with one single bullet at any of those levels. You have to treat it as that coordinated package. And when we do that, there's really good data out there to show, well, let's look at this. Let's look at a rodent model of autism. And we know that they have all the things that I just said. They have microbiome disruptions, they have leaky gut, they have behavioral problems, they have inflammation. What if we just treated them with one thing, right? A probiotic treatment in mice with autism features. And you go step by step by step down and see what happens. You give them the probiotics, it changes their microbiome. Changing their microbiome improves their barrier integrity. That's reducing their leaky gut. Doing that reduces the leakage of things from the gut into the systemic circulation. Doing that restores the balance of those metabolites, which are those signaling molecules. You do that, you get better signaling and you have better behavior, right? That's all lovely in mice. Do we get the same thing in humans, right? Who really cares about an autistic mouse or a mouse that can't pay attention, right? Nobody. But these kind of research tells us that mechanistically it's possible that we can do this if we get all the moving parts balanced the right way. And so we've already done this in humans. We know that we can take stressed out humans and apply probiotic bacteria, prebiotic fibers to change what the microbiome looks like. That's what you're seeing on the left-hand side here, better microbiome. That leads to better psychology. People feel better. Their focus is better. Their brain fog is gone. Their energy and motivation is back. That's all wonderful. We can show that in humans. The way we do that is by giving specific strains of probiotic bacteria. So not just any old probiotics do this, but we know that this probiotic strain reduces stress. We know that this one reduces anxiety, and we know that this one reduces depression. So we give you all of those in the Amari products. We do it for adults. We do it for kids. We balance that with specific prebiotic fibers. So each of these is a different kind of fiber that's going to feed a different kind of microbiome bacteria. And then we just, we go the next level and we make sure that they're matched up. This bacteria wants to eat this kind of fiber. This bacteria wants to eat this kind of fiber. So you're giving the bacteria that are going to make those signals. You're giving them the fuel so that they can thrive and they can grow at their preferential rate. And then we do this. We do something. Oh, here's another. That was another one about the same thing. We also give something called phytobiotics, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But think about this for 1 second. These are 2 studies that have just come out in the last few months. This first one was done in the UK let me go back to this one, on this prebiotic fiber. It was done on this specific biimmunogalacto-oligosaccharide, what we call a GOS. The other study, the one underneath that, was done on this one, galactomannan, this specific one called sunfiber. And so what they found was this one done in the UK, this one done in Japan, they both did pretty much the same study. They got people with autism. They supplemented them with that prebiotic fiber, and they followed them over 8 weeks. At the end of that 8 weeks, what they found was behavior had changed. Autism-related behaviors were reduced, and all they gave was fiber. But think about what they're really doing. They're giving these prebiotic fibers, they're growing a different microbiome, they're reducing gut problems, gut integrity, stomach aches went down, food intolerances went down, they had less inflammation systemically, so those cytokines changed, and behavior changed. Exactly the things that we've been talking about here. And these two studies show that it's possible with just the fiber. So imagine if you gave the fiber, and you gave both kinds of fiber, and you gave all the bacteria, and you gave these phytobiotics. These are phytonutrients that we know can help protect the bacteria and can help with signaling across the gut-brain axis. What if you could do all that in a single product? That's what Amari products are doing. And so I said that I was gonna explain to you guys what I did with my own son. One thing we gave him was this. We gave him an amino acid from green tea called theanine. The brand that we use is called sun theanine. The reason we use this one is it can increase alpha waves. What that means is that it's taking you from a state of sort of being anxious and irritable, beta waves, and within about 45 minutes, you see a predominance of alpha waves, which are the kind of brain waves that you're generating when you're relaxed and alert, or what an athlete would call being in the zone. This in 45 minutes it is a phenomenal effect, and it just gets better and better and better over time. We also gave him something called enzogenol, a pine bark extract. So, we've presented these kinds of data all over the country. We've built this into our adult product and our kids product. This is our kids product, Kids Fundamentals. And the reason that approach is really different is because it's addressing all of those different levels. That's why it works as effectively as it does, because it's not just a microbiome solution or a gut integrity solution. It's doing all of these things.
And that's what I wanted to point out, because the bad foods is like fuel to the fire, correct? Like that's, when you look at it, it's just fueling everything up for inflammation. It explains why so many kids that have these behavioral issues, I think if you ask most parents, do your kids have problems pooping? Most of them say yes, or either constipation or they have diarrhea, they have this stomach ache. So it all makes like common sense. But what I love is, there's so much out on the market. So many parents have tried probiotics, and I'll get this all the time. I've tried probiotics and they didn't work. And so this is why it's different, is because of all the different angles, correct?
Right. And it's a little more than just saying, oh, I tried an antioxidant, I tried an anti-inflammatory herb, I tried a probiotic, I gave them a fiber, right? It isn't so much that it's that one category. Like probiotics, there's thousands of probiotics you could choose from, but the ones that we're giving are specific strains that we know have been clinically validated in humans for those mental wellness outcomes. So that's why, like, if you've tried probiotics and they haven't worked, maybe you chose one that wasn't the right strain. Maybe it was at the wrong potency. Maybe it was dead because it wasn't processed the right way. Could be all kinds of reasons why it didn't work for you.
And it's why it's also so frustrating, because people are spending money, they're trying all the right things, and when they don't get those results that they're looking for, it is frustrating. Now, I have a couple questions for you. For the Amari Kids line, what age do you recommend starting a child on it?
Yeah, we asked 2 and up. So my son, he's 17 now, and he still takes the kids product, right? He doesn't like to swallow pills, so he could take the adult, but he takes the kids products. He takes the Kids Fundamentals every morning, mixes it up. He takes the Kids Vita GBX every morning and half of the evenings, I would say, because, hey, he's a teenager. Everybody understands what I'm talking about there. And he gets phenomenal results from that. Let me just, so we say 2 to 17, but I know plenty of adults who take it because they like the way that it tastes. Let me close the loop on my son here real quick. Sure. So the other thing we gave him sun theanine, and then we gave him this enzogenol to help improve memory. So here you can see that your memory, your brain's ability to process is much faster with enzogenol compared to a control situation. So what we're enabling him to do is do more work in his brain, be more focused, calm his monkey mind, right? So he was able to focus and then improve with the suntheanine, his relaxed alertness. So the combination of those two things, exogenol, which is New Zealand pine bark extract, and suntheanine, which is that very purified theanine extract, those were the difference. Within 1 week's time, his teachers thought we had medicated him. He was so much better, right? And that's something that's available to people. In Japan, theanine is a first-line therapy for ADD. And in New Zealand, pine bark is a first-line therapy for ADD. If you could combine both of them and get both of those brain activities at the same time, that would be awesome. And we actually have them combined in our Amare products.
Wow.
So,
And what weight or age would you recommend if you had a child that, say, wants to swallow and prefer swallowing the adult? What age would you recommend them to switch over to the adult?
Yeah, with herbals, the general rule of thumb that we use is that when a child gets to be about 100 pounds, now metabolically, they're more like an adult than they are like a child anymore.
Right.
And so, let's say you have a 14-year-old who's 100 pounds. That 14-year-old, if they're okay swallowing capsules, could definitely move over to the adult products. If they don't, like my son, he'll sometimes double up on that, so he gets a double dose of the kids stuff. But that's a rule of thumb that we use for people, and it generally works pretty well.
Okay, perfect. It's amazing how it's all interconnected. Do you see a difference for someone that has a child with pandas to autism? Different programs, same protocol, just because it's such a multifactorial program that you created?
Yeah. It is the same protocol, and that sounds like I don't want to suggest that everybody's the same and everybody's disruptions are the same, but from a patterns perspective, a dysbiotic microbiome and an inflamed gut is going to be the common denominator across all of those, whether it's ADD or whether it's autism or whether it's pandas. And so if you can address that piece of the puzzle first, a lot of times you're going to get this cascading effect where you'll see rebalancing across the whole system. So I always say start with the microbiome and the gut and then see what else you need to do after that. And that's going to be effective in pandas. It's going to be effective in ADD. It's going to be effective in autism and depression and stress and anxiety and all the things that we talk about there. They're distinctly different, and they're distinctly different in the individuals, but pattern-wise, it really is that they want to start with that same fundamentals approach because it addresses so many of the levers.
It's like building a home. It's your foundation.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way
It's your foundation. I'm a former builder's wife. I always put a strong foundation. Now, in the adults version, we have something called Reboot, which is a 3-day cleanse. What would you tell parents that, we don't have a Reboot product for children? And do they need it, not need it?
Generally, I don't think that kids need it. One of the aspects of the Reboot that's really important is that, we want people to pretty drastically change their diets when they're on those 3 days. So you'll notice that we're really de-emphasizing processed foods and sugar. And the reason we do that is because those are the kinds of things that grow the wrong bacteria, the bad bacteria. So you stop eating those foods for 3 days, you're gonna kill off those bad bacteria. The foods that you're replacing that with are high fiber, high phytonutrient fruits and vegetables. And that can be challenging to get into a lot of kids. We certainly want to reduce their process as much as possible, but really having them pound salads and vegetable soups and things like that for 3 days can sometimes be a challenge. So, I'll generally say to parents, like, some teenagers can tolerate that kind of thing, but if it's kids we're talking about, I say just go for the products. Just go for fundamentals and Kids Vita GBX, and you're going to get the same benefits. It's not like you have to do a Reboot in order to get these benefits. That isn't the case at all.
Right. And, don't you find that what I always encourage parents is it starts from the parents. And even by you starting to cook more microbiome-friendly recipes that we have in our B3 program, by you just being the example and starting to introduce healthier things, and that's what you serve, it's amazing how over time those new behaviors become more of a discipline, and
Right.
these buds change. That's the other thing that I have noticed for our family, to so many other people, is that their taste for food has changed. I've never seen something that's kicked the sugar crave and
Right.
curbed it like this has. And it's really because it might correct me if I'm wrong, but it's balancing out that microbiome, and bad bacteria feeds off of sugar, right? So it
That's
craves,
Yeah,
right?
well, it does. And I got to point out this. Liz just put into the chat room, my teenager responded very quickly and his symptoms of anxiety and depression reduced dramatically, right? So you see those kinds of things, but you also see, and sometimes it's almost at this subconscious level, that once you reduce the sugar, you change the bacteria. Once you change the bacteria, you change the signals that are going to the brain that are craving that sugar in the first place. So it takes a few days, to change what's growing in that microbiome. But once it's established, now you're not getting that sugar craving all the time, because those guys are dead. They're gone, or they're at least lessened enough so that you're not getting that shouting. They might be whispering, but they're not shouting, eat sugar.
Right. Right. Now, a lot of children and adults have a lot of food sensitivities.
Right.
What would you recommend for that child, right, that has all these food sensitivities? Just stay the strict diet that they're on and implement this program in?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you'll see with food sensitivities is that if you change the microbiome to a more balanced place and reduce that gut inflammation so you have better gut integrity, a lot of those food insensitivities go away. And we've been hearing that over and over and over again.
Say
People
that one
sometimes
more time. That's powerful. Say that
Yeah,
again.
people sometimes realize it accidentally, right? Because they'll say, I'm sensitive to X food, milk, for example. I can't do milk, and it might be the lactose, it might be the casein, it might be whatever. Can't do that. Now I'm gonna, and the reason they can't do that, the reason they have that intolerance, is because their microbiome is not in the right balance, or their gut is inflamed, or they have leaky gut, or all of that together. And likely it is all of that together. Once you rebalance that, they might then go and you sort of accidentally have some milk. They just forgot about it, and then they'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't get the rumbly tummy. I didn't get the breakout. I didn't get the gas. Well, and it's a revelation to them, and we hear that kind of thing all the time. It's not I should state this. It's not going to, if you are celiac and you can't have gluten, it's probably not going to change that. But if you're a little gluten insensitive, a little gluten intolerant, now maybe you can enjoy bread again because you've changed the source of that problem. It wasn't the food. It was that the food was a wrong match for that disruption that you had down in there. Fix the disruption. Now that food is a perfect match for you.
I'm seeing this over and over again with people, and the comments that people are sharing is awesome. My 16-year-old doesn't want sugar anymore, has been on Fundamentals adult form for 6 months now. I totally relate to that. That's our son. Jess, hey Jess, she says it helped her 7-year-old with his gluten intolerance. I'm hearing these stories again over and over again where they're able to occasionally have some gluten again, and it's not creating that. And also people aren't craving it. They just have, they might have a pizza and they're fine with it, and then they don't want it for a week.
Right.
So it's moderation, right? It's
Yep.
allows the body mentally too to want more moderation. Now, I get this question often too. Picky eaters, right? Which I think come with food sensitivities,
Yep.
sensory disorders, kids that have sensory disorders. All these parents, I feel my heart goes out for them because it's so hard to creative to get this in. And yet I know that if they can over time continuously give this to their child, it can heal those disruptions. What are some recommendations that you have found, tricks, so to speak, to get this into kids that have that sensory disorder and they're those real picky eaters?
Yeah, well, I think we've done a pretty good job with our Fundamentals powder and our Vita GBX chewables, right? The powder tastes. First time my son tasted, he took a taste. Look, I mixed it up and I said, "Taste this," and he looked at it and looked at me, because this is what I do. I'm always having him taste terrible things as an experiment, right? And he looked at it. I'm like, "Come on, please just taste it." And he tasted it. He goes, it tastes like Sunny D, right? Which is a chemical bomb of artificial flavors and sweeteners and colors. And if our all natural healthy thing can taste like that, that's a triumph, right? Same thing with the chewable vitamins, right? They taste kind of like sweet tarts, right? So he used to be very, very sensitive eater. Those didn't cause a problem for him. And something I've observed, I wouldn't say that this is research necessarily, because it's an experiment of one. His sensitivities for other foods have gone down since he's been taking them. You know, so like he's more open to trying something. He's less likely to turn his nose up or push it to the side. Like that kind of stuff is like, that's a huge aspect of our quality of life, you know, that we don't have
Totally.
to have, you know, all these different things. So
Totally.
I think if parents can just get it in, you know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, I'm kind of an 80-20 person, right? 80% of the time you're eating well, you're always on your supplements. 20% of the time, maybe you forget. 20% of the time, you have that pizza that you just talked about, you know, so that, you know, within that context, you're really trying to do it, you know, most of the time. I think you're going to get the same sorts of benefits.
Exactly. I do think it's just a matter of staying consistent and
Yep.
trying different things, whether it's a little bit of applesauce or a little bit of a healthy brand of yogurt. Do you even recommend like putting a little bit extra stevia in it, you know, to help get it into kids? Like,
Yeah, really, whatever it takes. Like when we first initially started giving Alex his suntheanine and his exogenol, we would put it into chocolate milk. We would put it into smoothies because there
yep.
was no heck he was gonna take it like that. Same thing with fundamentals. It tastes pretty good on its own, but if you have to sneak it into things, at least to get that process started, you know, you do what you have to. You know,
It's
put it into.
so true. It's like medicine, right? With
Yep.
medicine, my husband and I always said this with our kids. When the kids were sick and they needed medicine, it wasn't an option. They got it, right? You just figured out a way. Sometimes it was to
Yep.
squeeze the cheeks. But what I think you've done an A+ job is, I would say most of the time, these kids are just, my 4-year-old granddaughter is an example, love the taste. You've really done a phenomenal job keeping this as natural, holistic, organic, without all the junk, and it actually tastes good. So thank you, because it's really challenging to do that. People ask all the time, why isn't it in gummy form, or why isn't it this? And they don't realize that then it's not healthy, correct? Because you're adding
Yeah,
things.
well, you know, we actually looked at trying to do, you know, either of these two products, the Kids Fundamentals or the Kids Vita GBX, as a gummy. And the reason we couldn't is that gummy delivery, most people don't realize this, but most gummies have hardly any nutrition in them at all, because the load or the amount of stuff you can fit in a gummy before it starts to settle out is really, really small. So all those gummy vitamins that are out there, they taste lovely, but there's no really good nutrition in them. You know, so in order for us to deliver the kind of nutrition we wanted, to get the benefits that we wanted, we had to do one as a powder and one as a chewable. That was the reality of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. You make me kind of sad, because before Amare, I had this like fetish with gummy bears. That was like my weakness. Some women love chocolate. I love gummies. I have to say, they don't taste good to me anymore. I don't know what you did to this stuff. They don't even taste good. So I guess that's probably a good thing. Okay, antibiotics. Most kids have been on an antibiotic in their
Yeah.
lifetime, and adults.
Yeah.
Would you recommend, if a child has been on an antibiotic, should any of these doses be adjusted, a probiotic added in? What would you recommend? Stay the course?
Yeah, you know, I don't think that they necessarily need to you know, double up on dosing or add in another probiotic. They can, you know, so we have a capsule product that's just called Probiotic, and that one is 5 different strains. Compared to the 3 mental wellness strains that we have in the fundamentals, 5 different strains that help with things like mineral absorption and immune system function and gut inflammation and those sorts of things, right? So if someone's been through several courses of antibiotics, it might be good for you to go on a couple of bottles, you know, a month, or 2 months, 3 months of a probiotic to really reset the balance there. Because, you know, even one course of antibiotic therapy can completely decimate the microbiome. And unless you actively go in there and repair it, it's always going to be damaged. And think about this. It's going to make a lot of people sad. So the average American kid, by the time that they're 12 years old, they have gone through 10 to 12 courses of antibiotics. So that's like almost one a year for their
Wow.
entire lives. And so think about how damaged their microbiome is. It's no wonder that they can't focus, and they, have behavior problems and food intolerances and depression and stress
Right.
and all the rest, So
Now, would you suggest then the adult one that you pull apart the capsule for kids that can't swallow? And
yeah, that's what we do with my son, because he has such a strong gag reflex. And
Mhm.
so one thing we've noticed with him, when he takes it, his acne is a lot
Yeah,
less. And so
yeah.
he'll empty it into juice. Sometimes he empties it right into his fundamentals because he's drinking that
Mhm.
anyway. The downside of doing that is that there's 2 strains in the 5-strain formula that are not very, they're a little susceptible to stomach acid. So your stomach acid is going to kill all of it, but it will kill about 50% of those 2 strains. So, you're getting the majority, you're getting, full strength of 3 strains and about 50% of those other 2. So,
Right,
and that's one of the reasons we put it in an acid resistant capsule. So if you can swallow it, it
right,
passes through the stomach and releases where it's
right.
supposed to.
Right. So when you take a look at kids that are under stress, kids that do have focus issues and have this static cling going on, and then they go to school and they have the peer pressure and they can't focus, and that depression does set in. And that is something that I'm getting call after call after call of parents that don't know what to do. They're struggling. The doctors are just wanting to put them on the meds because that's their option. That's what they have.
Yep.
And really, same thing as it is ADHD, ADD, autism, pandas is just keeping it this really going in there and cleaning up. It's the same story because it's so multifactorial, correct?
Yep, yep, it really is. And let me share one more slide with you, because I think this gets to the root of what you're talking about. So this is for an ingredient that we have in our mood product. And so I'm not most kids aren't going to be taking our mood product necessarily. I know a lot of teenagers do, but the point that I want to get across is this idea of stress resilience. We're getting better stress resilience with our mood product through this ingredient, Zembrin. It's a plant called Kana. It's like a little cactus that grows in South Africa. We get the same sort of a resilience effect from what we're doing with the combination of kids fundamentals and kids Vita GBX taken at the same time. Somebody in the chat room asked, do you take one or the other, or do you take both? They both stand on their own. They both deliver their own set of benefits. But if you can take them both together, you're getting this kind of a resilience effect, which means when the kids are under stress, their body's going to mount their brain is going to mount a stress response. If you can attenuate that a little bit or just tamp it down, that means that they can be in the same stressful environment but thrive. So the difference between low stress resilience and high stress resilience is really the difference between some level of stress causing you to go, I can't deal with this right now, and quite literally backing away from it, versus high stress resilience is that same exact level of stress, you being able to stand in front of it and go, well, this isn't the greatest situation in the world, but all right, let's do this. Let's figure this out. That's the difference between high and low stress resilience. And that's what we want for our kids.
Right.
Separate from ADD and autism and depression and all that kind of stuff, if they can just be more resilient in
Yes.
their second brain and in their first brain, they're going to do better. And that's what we all want for them.
They're more likely to respond than to overreact.
Yep,
And
exactly.
we have witnessed that with all of our own kids, myself included. Like, it is amazing. They're under the same amount of stress, but there is that resiliency factor going from that burnout stage to vigor. And it's so exciting to share this. Now, do you recommend AM, PM difference, giving the kids and adults their supplements? What do you recommend?
No, I like it to be done in the AM because if you do in the AM, it's like you're less likely to forget it if you do it in the AM. Doing in the AM also gives you the benefit of getting those acute anti-stress benefits over the course of the day. Remember how sun-theanine works. It works over the course of 45 minutes. So, that can certainly help you if you're tense at night, but it will definitely help you throughout the day when you're in the thick of it, when you want to be resilient and things like that. So.
And time frame. I know that's like every parent's question is, what is an expectation of real time that we hope to see some kind of a result in children and adults?
Yeah, so that really depends on what measurement we're talking about. So one of the things that I really love about our Amare products is that they're specifically built with this concept that we call phased benefits, meaning some of the benefits will come nearly immediately, like that relaxed alertness effect of theanine, right? 45 minutes is pretty darn near to immediate, as about as immediate as we can get with a natural option. So you'll feel more focused, more relaxed, less tense pretty quickly. On the Vita GBX side, we have phytonutrients in there that can help you feel more clear and less brain fog and more, sharper pretty quickly, right? So that day. But then when we start talking about like real memory issues or cognition issues, that's more like a week, because there we're talking about neurotransmitter balance, which is a little bit longer in terms of rebalancing. Then when we're starting to talk about really changing the microbiome and changing neurotransmitter levels, like serotonin levels and GABA levels and things like that, now we're talking a month. So like there's certain things that'll happen in a day, certain things that'll happen in a week, certain things that'll happen in a month. And that's important for parents to understand, because like, my wife and I, when we tried the pine bark and the theanine with our son, within a day, we were like, I think he's better. Do you think he's better? Like, we were having the placebo response because we wanted him to be better. You know what I mean? And he didn't even know he was taking it. So there was no placebo response there. But parents need to realize that, like, they might be better, but in these certain ways, and they're going to get better, and they're going to get better, and they're going to get better with that continued usage as we start to rebalance across those other aspects of the gut-brain axis.
So just give it time and patience. Patience is a virtue. It's always hard to hear, but it's the truth. Now, the difference between the probiotic and the mentobiotics is it's different strains, right?
Right, exactly.
Question all the time. So the probiotic is more the strains for the intestinal. The mentobiotics is more for the how you feel, your thinking, your moods. Correct. So they're not the same. So you
exactly. They're not the same. They can be taken together. They don't have to be taken together. But if somebody has heard about, probiotics are generally healthy for me, I need to get that. You're talking about probiotics. Mm-hmm. What you probably have never heard is that probiotics can change what happens in your brain. Those are very specific strains, and that's what we have in fundamentals.
Wow, amazing. Shawn, I cannot thank you enough.
My pleasure.
Absolutely amazing. And I know there was a couple other questions on there. I'm going to ask one more.
Okay.
SIBO. Somebody had asked about, I'm hearing more and more and more people that are having this issue. And that's a whole different topic, I know. But you do have some recommendations for that, don't you?
Yeah, I do. So SIBO is a completely different situation, but it shares a little bit of what we've already talked about, right? So here we're really focusing on, all right, we've got these brain issues, we've got these behavior issues, we've got these focus issues. Let's look at the gut first. Let's look at the microbiome. Let's look at the gut integrity. Let's reduce that leaky gut. Let's reduce inflammation. People with SIBO have all of that going on too. And their symptoms generally end up being pain, fatigue, just feeling blah, sometimes having brain fog. And so the supplementation is similar, but with one important difference. So people with SIBO are going to, so SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or Candida, which is yeast overgrowth, are going to do the same thing. They're going to do reboot. So that's 3 days, clear everything out of there. But then before you start supplementing with probiotics, you need to change the pH. You need to change the environment of the gut. The reason that the yeast and the bacteria started growing in places in the gut where they're not supposed to grow is because the environment was not the way it was supposed to be. So do your reboot, clear everything out. Before you start supplementing, use our digestive product. That's going to help to reset the pH in the stomach, in the small intestine, in the large intestine, back to the levels it's supposed to be. Then after you do that, you can start supplementing with probiotics and prebiotics. So the regimen that I like to use for people is do reboot as recommended for 3 days, then do digestive 2 capsules at every meal. So you're taking 6 capsules a day. You're going to go through a whole bottle in about a week. That'll reset everything. And then you start a product like probiotics or fundamentals, and now you're going to have the right environment to populate the way that your gut is supposed to.
Love it. I thank you for that, because I get that question all the time too. And I apologize. One more. So
That's all right.
a lot of kids are on medications. I feel like this is a really important question. They're already on a medication. They're on Ritalin or they're on Adderall. I know that I always recommend talk to their physician.
Yep.
Talk to their physician to be responsible. If it were your child, a lot of those things you cannot go cold turkey off of. You need to wean off of.
Yep.
What do you recommend if it was your kid?
Yeah, so if it was my kid, like I know his doctor, who is a great doctor, love him, but he doesn't know anything about nutrition, right? That's not part of his training. He was never learned that in medical school. And that's typical for most doctors, physicians, unless they've gone out and gotten postgraduate training, like a functional medicine doctor. And then in that situation, those doctors are going to look at our products and go, oh my gosh, I wish I had access to these sooner, right? Because of all the things that we've talked about. So what I'll generally say is start them on fundamentals, start them on VitaGBX. And don't change their medication. Keep their medication exactly the way that the doctor has prescribed it. Then over the course of those phased benefits, day 1, week 1, month 1, you're going to start seeing them getting better. And whenever they get better enough where you think that it's the right time for you to go in and have that conversation with the doctor to say, hey, look, they're better. Maybe it's time to lower the dose of whatever they're taking. Is that appropriate? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe they're on a combination of different medications, and now you can drop one off and they can get by with just one. That piece is going to be very individual situation that you absolutely want to work with their healthcare provider on. Okay?
Mm-hmm. No,
you don't have to worry about interactions or interferences. Just keep an eye on them. And then when they get to that point where they're like, hey, they're better, now let's go to the doctor and talk about what's the best course of action.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I want to be mindful of everyone's time and of your time, Dr. Shawn. So I want to thank you so much for allowing us to pick your brain and, shedding some light and love and hope for so many families. And if you're new here tonight, we want to thank you for taking the time for checking us out. And listen, we want to serve you. That's what we're here for. We would love to follow up with you. So whoever shared this with you tonight is going to do just that. They're going to follow up with you. They're going to talk through all your options and help you figure out the best plan for both you and your children. So thanks again, Shawn, so much. I know that there's so many more questions, but I think we got some really good nuggets tonight. And listen, this won't be the last time. We'll just have to have you back.
We'll do it again. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks again, Shawn.
Thanks,
Good night,
Sarah.
everyone.
Bye.